Right now, at this exact moment, the average American household has less than 3 days of food stored at home. 3 days. That's the number the USDA and FEMA have consistently pointed to for over 2 decades, and it hasn't meaningfully improved. But here's the thing. If you've watched any prepper content online, you already know the basics. Food, water, flashlight. You've heard it. Maybe you've even started. And yet there's a gap. A real dangerous gap between the basics everyone talks about and what actually keeps a family stable when things go sideways. And that gap? It's not filled by beans and bullets. It's filled by 15 specific things that most preppers, even experienced ones, either overlook, underestimate. My name is Morgan, and I've been prepping seriously for over a decade, closer to 15 years if I'm being honest. I've made the mistakes. I've bought the gear I never used. I've also been in real situations, power outages that lasted days, supply chain gaps, the kind of moments where you're either ready or you're not. And what I've learned is that the stuff that actually matters almost never makes the headlines. It doesn't get the clickbait thumbnail. It doesn't sell survival kits on Amazon. So today I'm giving you the actual list. Not the influencer list. Not the gear sponsor list. The quiet list, the one I actually rely on. The one that fills in the gaps most preparedness content completely ignores. Some of these items are already sitting in your house right now. You just don't know to value them yet. Stick with me through all 15, because number 6 is something FEMA officially considers Tier 1, and almost no YouTube channel has ever dedicated real time to it. And number 15 is the one that took me the longest to accept, because it's not a thing you can buy at all. Let's get into it. Item 1. The rechargeable power ecosystem, not just batteries. Let's start with power, because almost everything else on this list depends on it in some way. Now everyone says store batteries, and yes, alkaline batteries have their place. But a battery you use once and throw away is not a system, it's a countdown clock. What most people build is what I call a one-tier power setup. One drawer of AA batteries. Done. What you actually need is a 3-tier power hierarchy. Tier 1 is your micro level, a small 10,000 to 20,000 milliamp hour power bank. Something you can slip in a bag that charges your phone, your headlamp, your emergency radio. These run anywhere from $25 to $45 for a reliable unit. Tier 2 is your medium level, a larger 40,000 milliamp hour battery station. This can charge a phone 10 or more times over, power small LED lights, and run a CPAP machine for a night or two if needed. Good units come in under $60. Tier 3 is your macro level, a portable power station, something in the 500 to 1000 watt-hour range. These can run a small appliance, charge everything in your home simultaneously, and be recharged by a solar panel. They're a bigger investment, but they change the game entirely. Here's the thing most people get wrong. They buy the power bank and stop there. Modern lithium iron phosphate, Life EPO4, batteries retain roughly 80% of their capacity after 2,000 full charge cycles. That's years and years of reliable backup power. The technology exists. Most people just don't build the full stack. Start wherever you are. But understand that one device is not a plan. A layered system is a plan. But power is useless if you can't do anything with it. Which is why the next item is about what happens when your electric appliances become very expensive paperweights. Item 2. The manual tools kit, your non-electric kitchen. Here's something that will stop you cold if you actually think about it. Walk into the average modern kitchen and count how many food preparation tasks you can complete without any electricity. Not many. The blender, the food processor, the electric can opener, the microwave, every one of those goes down with the grid. Now look at kitchens from before 1950. Every single one was equipped with manual tools as the standard. Not as backup. As primary. We've engineered ourselves into a corner and called it progress. What you actually need is a manual food prep toolkit. That means at minimum, a quality manual can opener, and not just one, have 2 or 3 because they break, a mortar and pestle for grinding spices and basic medicines, a hand crank grain mill if you're storing any whole grains, and a manual hand whisk or egg beater for baking needs. A quality hand grain mill runs $60 to $150 and can process 1 to 2 pounds of grain per minute. A mortar and pestle from a restaurant supply store costs $20 to $30 and will outlast everything else in your prep kit. The P38 military can opener, that tiny folding tool you can put on a keychain, costs about $3 and has been opening cans reliably since World War II. Get 5 of them. Put them everywhere. What most people get wrong here is thinking I have a can opener is the same as having a manual food system. It's not. Think through every step of how you'd prepare a hot meal for your family with zero electricity, and then backfill the tools you'd need to do it. And there's actually one piece of this manual toolkit that doubles as a barter asset during shortages. I'll get to that later in the list. Item 3. Sanitation, the survival category that kills more people than the disaster itself. This one is uncomfortable, and that's exactly why most prepper content glosses over it. In virtually every major grid down or disaster scenario in modern history, Hurricane Katrina, the 2010 Haiti earthquake, the 2021 Texas freeze, sanitation failure was among the top secondary causes of death and serious illness. Not the initial event. What came after? Waterborne disease, poor waste management, contaminated wound care. The thing nobody wanted to talk about in polite company became the thing that mattered most. Most preppers store soap. A few store hand sanitizer. Almost none have a real waste management plan. Here's the sanitation stack you actually need. Contractor bags, the thick black ones, not the thin kitchen bags, serve more functions than almost any other single item on this list. Emergency toilet liner, waterproofing for gear, makeshift rain poncho, waste containment, general storage. A 50-pack costs around $25. Buy 2. Beyond that, a supply of disposable gloves for any medical or sanitation task, a portable camping toilet or at minimum a 5-gallon bucket with a snap-on toilet lid, around $20 at any hardware store, calcium hypochlorite pool shock tablets or unscented bleach for water sanitation and surface disinfection, and powdered lime if you're planning for any extended period without functional sewage. Isopropyl alcohol at 70% concentration is worth stocking heavily. It's both a wound cleaner and a general disinfectant, and it has an indefinite shelf life when kept sealed. Baking soda and white vinegar, as the reference correctly notes, cover an enormous range of cleaning tasks and store essentially indefinitely when kept properly sealed and dry. Don't skip this category. Your comfort and your health both depend on it in ways most people don't imagine until they're living it. Item 4. The medical triage stack beyond dollar store band-aids. The dollar store first aid kit is better than nothing. Let's be clear about that. Alcohol wipes, basic bandages, hydrogen peroxide, cotton balls, these belong in your kit, and they're cheap and they work for their purpose. But there is a category of medical need that sits just above everyday scrapes, and almost no one in the prepper community is honest about how underprepared most people are for it. What do you do about a deep laceration? A serious burn? Significant bleeding from a limb? These are not rare scenarios in a grid-down event. They're predictable ones, especially when people are doing unfamiliar physical work in stressful conditions. The American College of Surgeons Stop the Bleed campaign, which has now trained over 2.5 million Americans, is built on a single terrifying but empowering insight. The majority of trauma deaths from bleeding are preventable within the first few minutes, before any professional help arrives. Your 2-tier medical system works like this. Tier 1 is your everyday kit, the dollar store supplies, over-the-counter medications in variety, pain, anti-inflammatory, antihistamine, anti-diarrheal. This last one is more important than most people realize, and basic wound care items. Tier 2 is your trauma kit, a properly rated tourniquet like a CAT or soft TW, which costs $30 to $35 and should be in every home with no exceptions. Hemostatic gauze like QuickClot or Celox for packing deep wounds, a pressure bandage like the Israeli bandage, a SAM splint, and medical-grade nitrile gloves in multiple sizes. Take a Stop the Bleed course. They're free, they're 2 hours, and they're available almost everywhere. Skills make gear useful. Without skills, the best trauma kit in the world just sits in its pouch. Item 5. The morale stack, because survival is a mental game. There is a type of prepper content that makes it seem like the goal is to suffer correctly, to eat your bland emergency rations with grim efficiency and feel virtuous about your misery. I reject that entirely. After 72 hours without normal routine, no power, no internet, disrupted sleep, limited food variety, morale degradation becomes a real and measurable threat. The Red Cross and FEMA disaster relief programs both allocate specific budget for what they call comfort items in their relief distributions. These organizations have seen enough real disasters to know that the mental state of survivors directly impacts their decision-making. What most preppers get wrong is the false choice between calories and comfort. You need both. Your morale kit should include comfort foods your family actually loves, not because they're optimal nutrition, but because a familiar taste in a stressful moment does something that 1,200 calories of beans cannot. It should include a board game or two, a deck of cards, a few paperback books, a battery-powered DVD player for families with kids, one small personal luxury item per family member, whatever that means for you. Coffee. I'm going to say it plainly. Store coffee. Instant, ground, whole bean with a hand grinder, whatever your preference. The person who has coffee in a power outage is a hero. Clean socks and underwear improve morale more than any gear item I've ever owned. And I'll expand on that in the clothing section. But here's where it gets uncomfortable, because the next item is something FEMA officially rates as a Tier 1 preparedness priority, and virtually no prepper YouTube channel spends any real time on it. Item 6. The paper dependency prep, the zero-cost item that protects everything else. I want you to imagine this scenario. Your house burns down, or floods, or you have to evacuate in under 10 minutes. Everything is gone or left behind. You make it out physically safe. And then the second disaster begins, proving who you are, accessing your bank account without your card number, explaining to the pharmacist what medications you take, demonstrating to FEMA that you own that property, showing the school that those are your kids. FEMA's official preparedness checklist, not a YouTube channel's checklist, the government's own list, explicitly rates document backup as a Tier 1 priority, the same level as water and yet in 10 or 15 years of watching prepper content, I have almost never seen a full video dedicated to this. Here's what your laminated document packet needs to include: copies of government IDs for every family member, insurance policies, home, auto, health, prescription records with dosages, your property deed or lease, vaccination records for every person and any pets, social security cards, and a contact list with phone numbers written by hand, and critical account numbers for your bank and utilities. Print them. Laminate them. Put them in a waterproof bag. Put that bag in a fireproof box. Know exactly where that box is and how to grab it in under 60 seconds. The second copy goes to a trusted family member or friend who lives elsewhere, not in a cloud backup, because clouds require power and internet, and often require the very devices you no longer have. This item costs you nothing but time. It is arguably the highest return on effort prep on this entire list. Do it this weekend. Item 7. The communication stack, the prep that fails silently. Your phone won't work. I know that sounds harsh, but it needs to be said plainly. In a significant grid-down emergency, a major storm, a regional power failure, a flood, cellular networks are overwhelmed within hours. During Hurricane Katrina, cell service was functionally gone across the affected region almost immediately. During the 2021 Texas winter storm freeze, millions of Texans found their phones useless at exactly the moment they needed them most. This matters because most people's entire communication plan is their smartphone. What you actually need is a two-way communication capability that requires zero infrastructure. FRS, Family Radio Service. Radios are the simplest answer. They require no license to operate. They cost $35 to $60 for a reliable pair. They work over a range of 1 to 5 miles in typical conditions, and they require nothing but batteries or a charge to function. You're talking directly to the other radio. No tower, no internet, no subscription. Beyond the radios, your communication prep should include a handwritten neighborhood contact sheet, the names, addresses, and landline or radio channel of the 5 or 10 households closest to you. This sounds old-fashioned. That's exactly why it works when modern systems fail. The third piece is an out-of-area designated contact. This is a person, a relative, a friend, who lives at least 100 miles away and is not affected by your local emergency. During a regional event, local calls often fail, but long-distance calls sometimes get through. Your whole family knows to check in with this one person, and that person relays status between family members. Most prepper content treats communication as passive. Have a radio to receive information. What you actually need is active, the ability to communicate with your family and your immediate community. The next item on this list is something most preppers know they should deal with, but actively avoid. And in a real event, it's the gap that creates the most preventable harm. Item 8. Water. Not just store water. An actual plan. Store water is advice. What I'm giving you now is a plan. FEMA recommends a minimum of 1 gallon per person per day for drinking and basic sanitation. For a family of 4, that's 28 gallons for a 1-week supply. The average American family has somewhere between 2 and 4 gallons on hand at any given moment. Think about that gap. But the bigger mistake isn't the quantity, it's the structure. Relying on a single form of water storage means a single point of failure. Your water plan needs 3 layers. Layer 1 is your short-term supply, commercially bottled water or filled 2-liter bottles that you rotate every 6 months. Easy, familiar, portable. Freeze a portion of it. Frozen water bottles double as ice packs and extend the useful life of your fridge and cooler during a power outage. Layer 2 is your medium-term supply, 5-gallon water jugs with a hand pump or pour spout. A family of 4 needs roughly 7 of these for a week's minimum supply. Store them in a cool, dark location and add a small amount of unscented bleach, about 8 drops per gallon, if filling from tap, and rotate every 6 months to a year. Layer 3 is your long-term filtration capability. This is what turns uncertain water sources into drinking water. The Sawyer Squeeze filter runs about $30 and is rated to filter up to 100,000 gallons before needing replacement. That is, for most practical purposes, a lifetime supply of filtration capability. Pair it with water purification tablets as a chemical backup. Pause right now. Genuinely stop and ask yourself, how many days of water does my household actually have? Most people who ask that question honestly feel a little uncomfortable. That's useful. Use it. If you want a printable version of this water plan along with checklists for everything else in this video, I have a free emergency binder linked in the description below. It's the most organized I've ever been about my own preps, and I want you to have it. Item 9. Backup cooking. The practical hierarchy. Not all stoves are created equal. And what works perfectly for a single person heating up soup is not what works for a family of 5 making dinner for the 3rd consecutive night without power. This is why having a backup cooking option is not the same as having a backup cooking plan. You need to think about it in tiers, the same way you thought about power. Your Tier 1 is your ultralight go-anywhere option, an alcohol stove. These are simple, have almost no moving parts, and run on denatured alcohol or even high-proof spirits in a pinch. The fuel stores indefinitely in a sealed container. The stove itself can fit in a pocket. It's not going to feed a crowd, but it will heat a cup of water or a can of soup for 1 or 2 people reliably. Your Tier 2 is your family-scale option, a propane or butane camp stove. A quality Coleman 2-burner camp stove runs $50 to $80 and can cook a full meal for a family. Know your fuel math. A standard 1-pound propane canister gives you approximately 1 to 2 hours of cooking at medium heat. A 20-pound tank extends that to 25 or more hours. Store your fuel safely, separately from your living area, and cycle through it. Your Tier 3 is your long-term fuel independence option, a rocket stove or wood-burning setup that runs on small sticks. No stored fuel required. This is your forever option if stored fuels run out. And remember, a large portion of your food storage is ready to eat directly from the can. No cooking required. That's not a failure state, that's a feature. Item 10. The clothing system, the prep that's already half there. Hypothermia can kill in conditions that don't even feel that cold, wet, windy. 50 degrees Fahrenheit will do it if you're underdressed. Heat exhaustion can incapacitate a person in hours. Both are prevented by the same thing, having the right clothing system. Military survival doctrine, which is built on hard, documented evidence of what actually keeps people alive in the field, teaches the layering system. You have 3 layers. Your base layer manages moisture by wicking sweat away from your skin. Your insulation layer traps heat. Your shell layer blocks wind and rain. What most preppers get wrong here is storing a heavy coat and calling it done. The coat helps, but wet cotton kills. The single most impactful and underrated clothing item in any prep kit is wool socks, specifically merino wool. Merino wool retains approximately 70% of its insulating value even when fully saturated with water. Cotton socks, when wet, retain nearly none. In a winter emergency where you're spending hours on your feet in cold, wet conditions, this is not a minor detail. For summer emergencies, evaporative cooling towels, the kind that activate when you wet them and lay across your neck, reduce perceived temperature significantly. They're cheap, they're compact, and they are dramatically underrepresented in most prep lists. Stock extra clothing in one size up from where your kids are now. They grow. Your prep should stay ahead of that. Item 11. Cash and barter, the inflation hedge hidden in plain sight. Cash is good. Small denomination cash is better. $20 bills and below, and yes, coins matter. In real grid-down events, many businesses cannot make change for large bills, and many can't process any digital payment whatsoever. Stock smaller denominations. The pennies that the U.S. Mint recently stopped producing may even have a small curiosity premium someday, but practically speaking, keep your cash in 5s, 10s, and 1s. But the conversation stops there for most prepper content. It shouldn't. Because the most experienced preparedness thinkers don't just hold cash, they hold barter assets. Items that serve them actively right now and appreciate dramatically in perceived value during shortages. Look at what happened after Hurricane Maria hit Puerto Rico in 2017. Within days, certain basic items became de facto currencies. Batteries, OTC medications, coffee, good lighters, salt. These are things that exist in your prep kit anyway, but understanding their dual-use nature changes how you prioritize and quantity them. The barter stack I recommend: stock more over-the-counter medications than you think you need, pain relief, allergy, anti-diarrheal, both for your own use and as trade goods. Stock salt in volume. It's cheap, it stores forever, and it was literally used as currency for most of human history. Quality disposable lighters in bulk. Coffee. And if your budget allows, a small quantity of pre-1965 U.S. silver dimes. Each one contains about 0.7 ounces of silver and is universally recognizable as having intrinsic value. These aren't hoarding supplies. They're redundant assets. Everything on this list either keeps you healthy or has value to someone else. That's the most efficient prep you can build. Item 12. Lighting redundancy, 3 tiers. Not one flashlight. One flashlight is one dead battery away from darkness. This is not a hypothetical risk. It's a certainty over a long enough event. The lighting principle that guides this item is the same one NASA uses for spacecraft systems, and the same one any serious engineer applies to critical infrastructure. No single point of failure. For something as fundamental as light, which affects safety, morale, sleep, your ability to read a document or treat a wound, you need at least 3 independent sources. Tier 1 is your ambient, passive, indefinite lighting, solar. Solar garden lights, solar lanterns, solar string lights. Put them outside during the day. Bring them inside at night. They recharge themselves. They have no fuel cost, no battery drain, and no running cost. The operational lifespan on a decent solar light, as real-world experience shows, can exceed 8 years even with daily use. Tier 2 is your multi-hour ambient lighting, candles and oil lanterns. Here's a specific detail most people don't know. A pure beeswax candle burns approximately 1 hour per inch of diameter. A 6-inch pillar candle gives you 35 to 40 hours of clean, steady light. Beeswax burns cleaner than paraffin and produces minimal soot. If you can find a local beeswax supplier, you can make your own, and this is also a barter skill. Tier 3 is your targeted mobile lighting, flashlights, and headlamps. Headlamps are almost always superior to handheld flashlights in practical use because they keep your hands free. Have at least two and store extra batteries. 39%. That means when a serious event hits, the majority of the people around you have nothing. That's not a reason for self-satisfaction. It's a reason to be a resource for your community. Which leads us to the last section of this list. Item 13. Skill preps. What can never be taken from you? Everything else on this list can be lost, stolen, flooded, burned, or confiscated. Every single item. Skills cannot. This is the insight that separates experienced preparedness thinking from gear accumulation. Special Forces survival doctrine doesn't prioritize his gear, it prioritizes the trained human. A properly trained soldier survives with nothing. An untrained civilian struggles with everything. The most common mistake in the prepper community is using gear as a substitute for skills. Buying a tourniquet doesn't mean you know how to apply one under stress. Owning a fire starter doesn't mean you can reliably produce fire in wet conditions. The gear is only as good as the person using it. Here are 5 skills you can begin learning this weekend, most of them for free. First, basic wound care and bleeding control. Take a Stop the Bleed course. They're free, 2 hours long, available in almost every major city, and they have trained over 2.5 million Americans since 2015. Know how to pack a wound, apply a tourniquet, and maintain pressure. Second, fire starting without matches or a lighter. Get a ferro rod and practice with it in your backyard. Understand tinder, kindling, and fuel. Do it 10 times in good conditions, then do it in the rain. Third, hand washing and drying clothes efficiently. This sounds trivial. It is not. Maintaining hygiene when you're producing physical labor in limited conditions is a real skill with real health consequences. Fourth, basic food preservation, dehydration, salt curing, and canning. Even knowing how to extend the shelf life of fresh food during a power outage is genuinely valuable. Fifth, how to shut off your home's gas, water, and electrical systems. Know where your shutoffs are. Know how to operate them. This one takes 20 minutes to learn and could save your house. Item 15 is the most important thing on this list, and it's something that cannot be purchased, cannot be stored. Item 14. Redundancy as a design system. In the prepper community, there's a saying, 1 is none, 2 is 1. The idea is that any single item, any single method, any single plan has a failure probability. Redundancy is how you reduce that probability towards 0. But most people apply this logic only to gear. 2 can openers. 2 flashlights. 2 knives. That's a start. It's not enough. Real redundancy means auditing every critical function in your preparedness plan for single points of failure, not just the objects, but the methods, routes, and contacts. Do you have only one way to filter water? That's a single point of failure. Do you have only one meeting point designated for your family in an emergency? One person who holds all the knowledge about your prep setup? One route out of your neighborhood? These are all single points of failure, and they're invisible until the moment they matter. The redundancy principle extends to skills, too. If only one person in your household knows how to operate your stove, apply a tourniquet, or navigate without GPS, emergency management research suggests that households with written family emergency action plans recover from disasters significantly faster than those without. This aligns with FEMA community preparedness data, though a specific percentage figure varies by study. Build your redundancy audit list. Walk through your home and your prep kit and ask for each category. What happens if this single item fails? What's my backup? And what's the backup to the backup? If the answer to either question is I don't have one, that's your next prep action. Item 15. Community, the prep that outlasts every supply. I've been building to this one deliberately, because this is the item that took me the longest to accept, and it's the one that I think the preparedness community as a whole. You cannot store enough of anything to survive indefinitely, alone. No one can. The math doesn't work, the psychology doesn't work, and the history doesn't support it. Every significant long-term survival situation in documented history, from wartime civilian populations to post-disaster recovery zones, has been navigated better by communities than by individuals. Every time. without exception. The University of Delaware Disaster Research Center, which has been studying community resilience for over 60 years, consistently finds that the single strongest predictor of how well a community recovers after a disaster is not its wealth, not its infrastructure, and not the average preparedness level of its residents. It is social cohesion. Whether people know each other, whether they have existing relationships of trust. The lone wolf prepper fantasy is psychologically appealing. It's also statistically harmful. Post-disaster studies consistently show that socially connected individuals receive aid more quickly, make better decisions under stress, and recover faster than isolated ones, not because they're lucky, but because connection is infrastructure. Here's how you begin building this now, not in a crisis, but today. Introduce yourself to the 3 households nearest to you. Know their names. Have a basic sense of who has what skills. Is there a nurse on your street? A mechanic? Someone with a generator? Someone with a truck? A person with medical training who doesn't know you exist is not part of your community network until you've actually spoken to them. Pre-arrange a simple communication protocol with 2 or 3 immediate neighbors. If something happens and we need to communicate, we'll use Channel 7 on FRS radios, or we'll put a green cloth in the window for "I'm okay," red for "I need help." Simple. Durable. Human. Know where your neighborhood's vulnerabilities are. The elderly person who lives alone, the family with very young children, the person with a medical dependency. That knowledge makes you a resource, not a burden. The best-stocked individual prepper with perfect gear and 0 community connections is less resilient than a neighborhood of moderately prepared people. That is not a soft, feel-good sentiment. That is what the data shows, consistently across decades of disaster research. Start where you are. 1 neighbor. 1 conversation. This weekend. So let's bring this home. 15 items, some gear, some systems, some mindset shifts that quietly separate the preppers who are genuinely ready from the ones who just have a lot of stuff in their garage. Rechargeable power in 3 tiers. A full manual food prep toolkit. A real sanitation plan, not just soap. A 2-tier medical kit with actual trauma capability. A morale stack because mental resilience is physical resilience. Your laminated document packet tonight, not someday. A 2-way communication system that works when phones don't. A 3-layer water plan with built-in filtration. A tiered cooking system matched to your family size. A clothing system built on layers, not just bulk. Cash in small denominations plus a barter asset stack. 3 lighting sources minimum. Skills that cannot be lost or stolen. Redundancy audited as a system, not just duplicate gear. And community, which is not a backup plan, it is the plan. Here's your challenge. Don't try to do all of this at once. That's how people get overwhelmed and do nothing. Pick the 2 items from this list that represent the biggest gaps in what you currently have. Just 2. And act on those this week. Drop a 1 in the comments if you already have 10 or more of these covered. I want to know how many of us are actually more prepared than we think. Drop a question mark if you're just getting started and you want some guidance on where to begin. I read every single comment and I will personally reply to as many as I can. If this video gave you something useful, a specific item, a reframe, a number you didn't have before, then please subscribe and hit the notification bell. Because I make this content consistently, and the next video is one you genuinely don't want to miss. In the next video, I'm going to show you exactly how to build a complete 30-day food supply for under $200 without buying a single freeze-dried meal, without needing a lot of storage space, and without eating things your family hates. I've done the math, I've built the actual system, and I'm going to walk you through every step of it. That one goes live soon. Make sure you're subscribed so you catch it. Also, the emergency binder I mentioned, the printable organized document system that holds your family's entire preparedness plan, is linked in the description below. There's a free version and a complete physical binder if you want something you can hold in your hands. It's at roguepreparer.com. Go check it out. Thank you for watching. Conquer tomorrow by preparing today. And I'll see you in the next one.